Hello, my name is Jennifer. I'm the hospitality manager here at Spearhead Winery. Today we're going to be discussing the impact of terroir on Pinot Noir. Spearhead Winery is located in Southeast Kelowna. That's just 10 minutes away from downtown Kelowna. Production is heavily focused on Pinot Noir, also making fantastic Chardonnay and aromatic white wines. Overall, the annual case production sits at about 6,000 cases, which classifies us as being a boutique winery. Anything under 10,000 cases puts you in that category. I'd like to give a little more background on the region as well as the company before we dive heavily into our discussion topic today. So let's start with the Okanagan Valley. Located just north of the US border and stretching north of Vernon, about a span of 135 kilometers is the length of Okanagan Lake. Majority of the vineyard that's planted in the valley is surrounding Okanagan Lake. We also have a few other unique characteristics of the Okanagan Valley, some of which include the latitude that the Okanagan sits at. It runs about parallel with where Champagne, France is situated on the 49th to 50th parallel. The benefit of that would be that we're getting more daylight hours per day. On average, we see about 16 hours of sunshine in the summertime, and that's about 10% more than Napa Valley. Another unique feature of the Okanagan Valley is the rain shadow effect. There's actually a nice visual here in the bottom right-hand side of the page. So as the weather pattern comes off of the Pacific, the rain and cloud hits the coastal mountains and releases. So what we're left with on the other side of that mountain range is sunshine and dry weather. Another unique feature then that leads me into the point of low rainfall. One of the benefits of having low rainfall in the Okanagan is that we have very little mildew and rot issues. Another effect or benefit here would be the lake effect. So the Okanagan Lake has a temperature moderating feature to it. So it actually, as the cool weather rolls in the fall and into winter, if we have a cold snap, the heat that's being released from Okanagan Lake will actually help sort of neutralize that effect, which will prevent bad winter damage and vine death. Another unique feature of this area is the diurnal temperature variation. So our daytime high to evening low is quite a large range. In the later summertime, we're seeing 35 degrees Celsius as our daytime high and coming down to about 10 degrees Celsius as our daytime low. The benefit of that is that we have our natural acidity maintained, and that's something that the Okanagan is really known for, both across Canada and on a global scale. All right, so on to the company. So Spearhead was really beginning to be established in 2008. That was when the first vines were put in the ground. Initially, it was a partnership of 4 couples. The couple pictured to the left is now our majority owners. So Bill and Marina Knutson have about 80% ownership of Spearhead Winery. There's a lovely secondary couple that's still involved, more on the silent side of partnership and sitting at about 20% ownership. Pictured to the right is our winemaker and general manager, Grant Stanley. He's been with the team here at Spearhead for several years now. Grant is a New Zealand Canadian dual citizen. After returning to Canada after many years in New Zealand, he landed his feet at Quillsgate Winery and served as head winemaker there for a decade. Went on to establish and start up a winery from the ground floor, and then from there has found his place here at Spearhead. He's really accelerated the Pinot Noir program at Spearhead Winery. They've always had a really good reputation for their Pinot, but he's just really brought it up to the next level. Okay, so this is an overview of our home estate. You can see the red highlighted area. That's going to be the area that we're discussing today. We call it the saddle block portion of the home estate. GFV Vineyard actually stands for Gentleman Farmers Vineyard. That is a conversation for another day. For consistency here today, I'm going to refer to this area as saddle block. So this initial planting went in 2008. It is predominantly Pinot Noir. There was also some Riesling and some Chardonnay that was put into the ground that year. A couple of years later, the tasting room opened, which was 2010. In 2014, there was a little more vineyard that was planted on the estate, specifically Pinot Noir. A little more planting went in 2016, more in the Riesling. So overall on the home estate, about 80% of the vines in the ground are Pinot Noir. And the property is 20 acres in total and 15 planted, pretty much maxed out at that point. So to round out Spearhead's portfolio, we also contract fruit. So Bill and Marina own Spearhead Winery's estate, and we contract fruit from a few other vineyards, two of which we're going to highlight today. So just across the bridge in West Kelowna is Coyote Vineyard, and we're getting specifically just Pinot Noir from there. A little farther south in Summerland, we have the Golden Retreat Vineyard, and we're sourcing both Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir from there. Again, farther south in Naramata, we source Chardonnay from Duncan Vineyard. Okay, so this is a really great visual of the three wines that we'll be discussing today. If by chance you have any or all of these wines available, please feel free to open one up or all of them up and taste along as we discuss them. And if you happen to have a block of cheese or perhaps some charcuterie meat in the fridge, please also feel free to have a snack as we do so. So the order in which these are laid out on the screen is actually the order that I would pour these wines for you if we were tasting all three. The Coyote is the lightest of the three. It's a little more red fruit forward. So I'd definitely start with that wine. Then I would move on to the Saddle Block Pinot Noir. It's a bit fuller, nice, soft, silky tannin and darker fruit flavor. The Golden Retreat is the boldest of the three, hence why I like to finish with this wine if I was tasting the three of them side by side. This one's a little more spice driven, jammier fruit, and has a little more tannin structure as well. So on the topic of cheese and meat, this is a great visual of the cheeses and meats that we would recommend being consumed with these specific wines. To be general on the topic of Pinot Noir, cheese selection, I would highly recommend sticking to firmer cheeses. Anything that's aged would be even better. They'll complement the wine quite well. They tend to sort of replenish what the tannin and acid in a nice big structured wine will take away from your cheeks. So it's a really great food pairing. In terms of charcuterie, I would recommend sticking with anything that's fatty, high salt content, and on the creamier side, if we're talking pâtés, I would avoid meats that are spicy. So like a hot capicola would not necessarily be ideal for a red wine, especially a Pinot Noir being a little more delicate. And part of that reason is that spiciness present in a meat can actually make the tannin of a red wine seem bitter, and we definitely don't want to do that. So all great choices here if you wanted to have a little nibble along as we discuss the wines. Okay, so the Coyote Pinot Noir. Pictured on the right here is Annabelle Stanley. She is the vineyard manager and owner of the Coyote Vineyard. I don't know if you can make out, but in the background of that photo is Okanagan Mountain Park. So this is a south-facing property. It does benefit from getting sunlight pretty much all day long. The soil type here is extremely high in volcanic content. Volcanic soil can impart a little bit of natural pH to a wine. Also being rock-based soil, it allows for great drainage. So that means that when you start getting your fruit set, they'll typically be smaller, more concentrated berries because of that drainage. One of the other impacts that volcanic soil can impart in wine, specifically Pinot Noir, is almost like a warmth or an earthiness. I quite often have people note that the Coyote Pinot has a little bit of an earthy component, almost a spicy clove note to it, which can be associated with the volcanic soils. Specifically, this vineyard is only planted with Dijon clone 115. And that clone on its own, whether it's on volcanic soil or not, is actually known for being a little higher again in pH. It's also known for offering perfume and structure to a wine. So great as a standalone clone, but also fantastic when blending into a final wine. In terms of fruit flavors, definitely more on the red fruit side, bright and fresh. Some of the notes that we have here, red cherry, raspberry, dried herbs. So again, that clove note and like an earthiness to it. All of this, I would say, is a pretty good description of how the Coyote is currently tasting. So we're currently tasting the 2019 vintage, and this is a really good description of that wine at the moment. So again, as I mentioned earlier, a little lighter bodied, medium acidity, and out of the three, I would actually prefer consuming this wine slightly chilled. It's very refreshing in the summertime. Saddle Block Pinot Noir. So our whole home estate is actually managed by Lisa Jansen. She's been with the company now for quite a few years, getting close to a decade actually, and she knows the vineyard inside and out. The Saddle Block portion of our property is a little bit of a combination. Some areas are north facing, some areas are south facing, and you can kind of see that in the visual here and understand why the name of this block is Saddle. It kind of has that half saddle shape to it. So some areas definitely are getting that afternoon sun. Anything on our home estate that gets a little more of the morning sun doesn't quite get as ripe at the end of the growing season, we'll actually put that towards our white Pinot Noir and rosé Pinot Noir program. So it's part of our sorting method, and Lisa's got her finger on the pulse with that. In terms of soil type, our home block here is it's old riverbed, so ancient riverbed, being high in alluvial soils such as glacial loam, sand, silt. There's even a little bit of clay in there. So it kind of varies across the property, which means that we have several different irrigation zones just so that Lisa can really monitor and make sure that we're not over irrigating any one area. Again, being on more of a rock-based soil type allows for great drainage. And when the fruit's coming in at the end of the season during harvest, we do notice, comparing Coyote fruit from Saddle Block and fruit from the Golden Retreat, that the home estate grapes tend to form even smaller than the other two properties. So in terms of clones, we did touch on Dijon clone 115 already, so I'll just give a little bit of background on Dijon 828. Actually, a really fun fact on this one is winemaker Grant Stanley was the first Canadian winemaker to bring 828 into country once it was approved for import. 828's known for being really intense with both fresh fruit flavors and color. It's more known for its dark fruit, and it's very fruit forward in general. If it's contributing anything to a wine, I would definitely say balance. It makes a beautiful single clone example, and also really contributes when you're blending it with other Pinot Noir clones. So in terms of flavors, the 2019 saddle block right now, yeah, definitely more on that dark fruit side, like dark cherry, dark blackberry. I even get something a little bit on the savory note. I noted bacon fat here, and more earth again present here. So forest floor or mushroom, something along those lines. We are doing wild fermentation with all of these wines, so they do tend to have that extra dimension and really rounded earthy component to them because of that. Again, noting that this wine has a really nice velvety texture to it, and a nice lingering long finish. It's a bit on the floral side too. Specifically, I find it has a nice violet note to it. This one's always a crowd pleaser and quite quick to sell out. Onto the Golden Retreat Pinot Noir. So pictured here is David Kazuki. He is the owner and manager of Summerhill Golden Retreat, Summerland's Golden Retreat Vineyard. Third generation family farm, so he definitely knows his property well. As you can make out in the background of this photo is Okanagan Lake. So this property is south facing. It gets all day sun exposure, and in some areas even benefits from a little bit of lake reflection and warmth back onto the property from that. The soil type is primarily sandy loam with quite a bit of gravel, about 10 to 12 feet down. Again, this sandy gravel soil type is known for absorbing heat, and that'll radiate back onto the vineyard. So overall, the fruit that we're getting from this site tends to be on the jammier side. It's always quite ripe. He has a few different clones planted on his site. We've already, again, discussed 115, so I'll leave that one out here, but I'll touch on Pommard 777 and 667. So Pommard is known for being a jammier clone, typically darker fruit flavors and even a little denser fruit flavors. Spice forward, and when I say spice, I'm thinking more sweet baking spices, but sometimes you can get those dried herb aromas as well. It also is known for adding tannin structure to a wine and tends to be the backbone when blending. As for Dijon Clone 777, this one is an aromatic, complex, black fruit forward character. It also adds a little bit of leather, tobacco, clove to a wine, and overall is known for adding finesse and power to a finished wine. 667 is again known for its aromatics and fine tannin. On warmer sites like this, it tends to ripen fairly quickly, and those that sugar ripening ends up resulting in more of like a Christmas spice mix flavor. So you're definitely getting a little more allspice, nutmeg, clove when grown on this sort of soil type and with this sort of aspect. So the 2019 Golden Retreat is definitely expressing more that dark fruit flavor, plum, dark cherry again, sweeter baking spices. If I was actually to summarize this in one thing, I would almost call it Black Forest cake, because it's that denser, chocolatey, warm spice sort of flavor to it. Though it does finish with that firmer tannin and has a little fuller body than the previous two Pinot Noirs. Okay, so that kind of concludes our discussion on those three Pinot Noirs and the terroir in which they're grown. Overall, I just think it's really unique when those wines come into the winery. Grant is treating them the exact same in the winemaking process. So what really chalks up the difference between the three of them is the soil in which they're grown on, the clones that are planted on those sites, and the sun exposure. So really interesting that all of that can impact the flavor of a wine. If you have any questions, please feel free to email them to us at info@spearheadwinery.com. We're also available by phone. at 250-763-7777. And if you want to learn a little bit more about any of these wines or some of the other wines that we offer, please visit our website. And hopefully you'll join us for another webinar in the near future. Thanks so much.